How's everyone doing today? All right, cool. So I want to share with you what we do at Sustainable Restaurant Group, and more importantly than that, I want to share with you the importance of restaurants. I'm hoping to actually bring novel things to you this morning, so hopefully you'll be excited by what I'm about to say and also find a lot of the information completely new. And the main point I want to be able to emphasize today is that restaurants have an incredible imperative to not only shape the future of sustainability for generations to come, but they can do a lot more than they're currently doing. And so we want to showcase today just our example of what we're doing in the hopes that you all, as guests of restaurants, will go and encourage other restaurateurs and other restaurant groups that you go and participate with to do the right thing. So, as we all know, every generation has something that defines them. For my grandparents, it was World War I, World War II, and the Great Depression. We're back. For my father's generation, it was civil rights and equality, and obviously that's something we know near and dear we're still fighting for today. But for my generation and those sitting in this room today who are young and alive and ready to go, it's climate change. Climate change is, in many regards, the greatest threat to this generation and probably the greatest threat to any generation we've seen before. And on top of that, it is the only challenge that I could look back on historically speaking and notice that it affects every single person on the planet today at the same time. There's no lag, right? Every person in every corner of the world today has to do something about climate change. So you may ask, why is a lowly restaurateur talking to you about something so bold? Well, the reason for this is quite simple. Restaurants sell food, and 25% of the greenhouse gas emissions. I might just speak like this. Can everyone hear me? No? Damn it. This thing just keeps going in and out. I was really hoping for that part. So 25% of all the greenhouse gas emissions in the world are attributed to the production of food, oftentimes livestock. I won't get into the nerdy science behind why, but for the most part, food is a massive portion of that. But the other thing is that transportation of food, the average piece of food in America travels 3,000 miles to make it to a person's plate. So when you look at food production and transportation, feeding ourselves in general probably accounts for roughly 40% of all of the greenhouse gases in the world. So as a person who drives an electric car, as a person who has solar on my house, hello? I'll just stay here. I'm going to do a little tight pace with you guys. I'm just going to do this one. Let me see if this might be the case. I'm just going to move the iPhone over here. We're just going to try something new. Okay, so greenhouse gas emissions, transportation, food, we're all on the same page, yes? Cool, great. So the thing is here we go. The thing is that restaurants now, amazing. Should I just keep it this close? Hold on, let me see. If I keep it like this. Restaurants now account for more dollars than grocery stores, and that happened in 2015. So just to put that into perspective, throughout human history, we cooked at home, right? We came home from work and we cooked as a family. Now, the reason we were able to do that is because, generally speaking, we were able to afford having a family on one income. Going back to that equality issue I mentioned earlier, there are now many people in the workforce, many women especially, who want equal pay and equal rights in the workforce. That's fantastic. But now no one is going to be sitting at home for 8 hours making a roast anymore in the Leave It to Beaver style scenario of the 1950s. And so what ends up happening is you get people who now have to have either two jobs to be able to support a family or want to be able to have dual incomes. And so with that, the rise of restaurants has been stupendous, and we now have grocery stores at $700 billion a year in the United States. And restaurants, the tech in here is amazing. Go back. Restaurants are at $863 billion. So that is the first time in history that's ever happened, and that's not going to slow down anytime soon. Anybody want to raise their hand real quick and tell me, have you eaten in a restaurant in the last week? Okay, it's almost all of you. Have you gotten meal delivery in the last week? Oh, very few of you, that's surprising. How many of you cooked all your meals at home this last week? Yeah, exactly. So, and by the way, that's awesome. But it's really, restaurants are becoming much more of a necessity than a luxury. And we as restaurateurs see that, and so that's why you're seeing things like fast casual. For those of you who don't understand what that is, fast casual is just a segment of the restaurant industry. Think like Chipotle. We have a brand called Quick Fish. The idea is to get healthy, sustainable food to you quickly, but better than quick serve, which is like McDonald's and Burger King and kind of the things of the past. But nonetheless, restaurants are becoming a bigger and bigger part of our daily lives. The other thing that restaurants do is they employ 1 in 10 people in the United States. This is a statistic that most people don't know. But basically, the largest employer behind the federal government is the restaurant industry. I have never, and I've gone back to 1950 to look for it, I have never heard once a president in their State of the Union address discuss the restaurant industry as something that needs to be challenged or changed to be able to help the middle class. And that is very weird when you talk about the auto industry or the energy sector or these other areas, and those industries don't add up to the restaurant industry. And so if we are talking, as we all, especially people in this room, know that there is a divide between the rich and the poor, and that is growing, and that gap is getting worse, we need to fix certain sectors of our economy. The restaurant industry is a pretty good place to start, considering it employs 1 in 10 people in this economy. So with that said, we look at this differently. I don't look at this as just serving you smiles and sustainable food. I look at this as actually the opportunity to revolutionize not only our economy, but globally the sustainable future of many generations. Restaurants have a unique purpose too, in that it's one of the last things where we can actually talk to you and communicate with you. If you think about your day, you go through it, you're on your phones, you're in meetings, you're very much in the zone of whatever it is that you're doing. And even when you're on a plane, right, the first thing you do, you get on a plane, you put your headphones on, you're like, don't talk to me, or I'm reading a book, whatever, right? And so with restaurants, you sit down and you're mine. Like, we have you for an hour to 2 hours to tell you a story, to talk with you, to make you feel good. That is like, besides therapy, that's probably the last place that exists in American society. And so restaurants have a responsibility to tell you things, to share things with you beyond just, here's this, eat it and get out. It really needs to be, by the way, can I engage you in an opportunity to do something for the community, to do something better for yourself, to do something better for the planet, and not in a preachy, gross, creepy way, but like in a wonderful way where we actually want to connect with you to encourage what restaurants really started as, which was a watering hole for the community in which people could come together to break bread, discuss things, and actually foster or further that community that they were in. That's what restaurants' original intentions were, and that's what we try to do at Bamboo Sushi and Quick Fish. Oh my goodness. Okay, here we go. So this is a plate of our nigiri. For those of you who have been in, just out of curiosity, how many people have eaten at a Bamboo Sushi or a Quick Fish? Whoa, thanks. Really appreciate that. That's lovely. So this may look like just a simple plate of sushi, and to many people it might be a beautiful plate of sushi. But to us, this is really what we see on the plate. Slides. We see sustainability, healthcare, immigration reform, something I'll talk about in a second, economic prosperity, and social equality. And it's a lot, right? It's just a few pieces of nigiri, and each one seems to represent one of those things. But in general, this is what food and food systems do. I mean, they touch people. It's one of the few things that you actually have to do multiple times a day, and every person on the planet does too. There's no one who gets out of that, right? Like, some people may be like, I don't drive, or I don't fly, or I don't want to live in a big house, or I don't do that. You all have to eat, and that's pretty much it. And so people who serve you food have a responsibility of doing it differently and doing it better. So here's how we do it. Supply chain. Our supply chain is quite unique. So we did a study with the University of California at Berkeley and a company called Blue Star Energy that came out of that, a gentleman named David Jaber. And we wanted to see if a restaurant could actually be lower in its carbon output than another restaurant. And so we're a sushi restaurant. Sushi, as many of you probably know, is one of the least sustainable foods in the world. Oftentimes you hear chefs and people, I flew this in today. It's the best. I flew this in. It's very unsustainable. And so we want to say, like, we sailed it in, or like it got slowly trucked to me in a very long, environmentally efficient truck or rail car. But then at the same time, people are like, well, isn't that gross? Like, what happens to my fish if it's on that slow boat, right? And the idea is, well, fresh fish is good, but actually fresh fish is a lie. For many of you, if some of you who know, I see a gentleman nodding about this fresh fish thing. The best fish come from deep waters. Deep waters happen to have the highest nutrient density because they're cold. And if you all can just think of a couple things, right? You go to a nice Caribbean vacation, you have little fish, little tropical fish. And you go in somewhere in the deep Arctic circle and there's like huge whales. So the colder the water, the better the fish. And so to find cold water, you have to get further away from shore. But if you get further away from shore and you're on a boat and all you have is ice, how long is that fish sitting on ice on the boat? You have to do the math on that. It's about 7 days. So I love New Seasons, I love Whole Foods, I love many markets, but when they say that the boat went out to X, Y, and Z wherever and then came back for this amount of freshness, it's generally not true. Fresh fish is usually 4 days old, sometimes 7 days old, sometimes 10 days old. Now that's not that old, but when you're wanting something that's been told to you that it was like pulled out of the water by Zeus and then brought to your plate, it's not really that way. And so what we wanted to do was say, okay, fishermen, you need to go out for like 2 weeks because that's the most environmentally efficient form of use of your diesel, and also you're gonna find us the best fish. But what we wanna do is we wanna put a super freezer on that boat. And so depending on the fish species that we have, we'll put a different freezer on that boat and freeze that fish and stop the cellular division of it instantaneously within 15 to 20 minutes of it coming out of the water. The other thing that allows it to do is that we don't lose fish in transportation. So 140 million metric tons of wild fish are caught every year, and estimated 90 million make it to people's mouths. So just to wrap your head around that, we could be feeding the planet another 50% over in the world's most environmentally responsible and consumed protein source, being seafood, and we're just wasting it. And mostly we're wasting it in improper storage and transportation and improper cold chain, right? Because if you catch a fish in a developing country where a lot of seafood comes from, and then they get back to shore and they don't have any way to actually freeze the fish, and then it needs to end up at a market in Europe or the United States or Asia, how does it get there without spoiling? And so a lot of it spoils. We don't want that to happen. So we make sure that with every fisherman we work with, they have the proper freezing and cold chain technique on the boat in real time to be able to actually limit the amount of fish that get wasted. And so we basically have a zero waste menu, not only in the way we serve it to you when you come into the restaurant in terms of the way we cross-utilize the menu, but also in the cold chain. We want nothing to waste. Now, on top of that, what does it do? It brings down the cost of the fish. So now we can serve you a product because there's no waste that's actually fully sustainable, 15 minutes out of the water, technically speaking, and on top of it is less expensive because we didn't lose anything in transport. We did this calculation with Blue Star, as I mentioned earlier. It took us 2.5 years to do the study. It looked at every single aspect of our menu down to the entire menu item and then all of the inputs. So as an example, how many people have had the burger at our restaurant? Okay, wow, small percentage. I heard someone clap for it, thank you. It's a good burger if you haven't had it. But I appreciate the seafood part. Don't eat the burger really if you don't want it. But we looked at even like what is the feed that's going into it, right? And all of the energy that it takes to actually feed the cow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really important to look at that. And what we discovered was we were 30% more efficient than any other sushi restaurant that could exist, even though we served things that were as good or better than any other place you could get them. And so we were super proud of this fact in our supply chain because not only were we able to credit the sustainability that you all know, we know where the boats are, we know who's catching it, we know the bycatch, if it has any, we know the methods of the fishermen, all of these other things, but now we could actually know, was there waste? And how much carbon are we putting out? So when we have this, we now, when you come into our restaurants and you eat with us, we actually will offset every ounce of carbon, or every molecule of carbon that you put out by consuming the product by planting seagrass. And we plant seagrass all over the world. And seagrass sequesters carbon at 8 times the rate of the Amazonian rainforest, which is super cool. And it also doesn't stop sequestering carbon like trees. So that's kind of one fun fact of our supply chain, something that we do differently and how we're able to make it a little bit more efficient. But it's working with our purveyors. It's using science and technology to our advantage. And it's being able to just think a little bit differently. Instead of calling a distributor and saying, hey, I need this, and a distributor's responsibility is to sell you whatever they have in their distribution warehouse, we go directly to wherever it is the product that we need, and we ask them, hey, how can we do this with you, and how can we make sure that we ensure the most sustainable transport possible? Sustainable aquaculture. This is a hot button topic for a lot of seafood people. How many people are scared of farm-raised fish? Raise your hand. Awesome. I'm super happy that you guys raised your hand. I'm scared of bad farm-raised fish, but I'm not scared of good farm-raised fish. The same way that I'm scared of factory-farmed chickens, cows, pigs, you name it, I am not scared of sustainably grown, naturally raised chickens, cows, pigs, etc. And so what we need to do is, aquaculture is interesting. It's the oldest farming practice of animals in the world. It's over 2,000 years old. It started in China way back when. But at the same time, it's never really advanced. Terrestrial species became more popular. We decided we would fish the oceans. The oceans were plentiful. We didn't need to use aquaculture. And so with that, what we ended up doing was when aquaculture started, it started just like factory farming, right? It started with big enterprise corporations. They would put a bunch of junk into the fish. They would feed them, antibiotics and hormones when the fish got sick to keep them going. And then on top of it, you would ultimately maybe get parasites, sea lice, other things with the fish when they escaped or in their pens because they were dirty. That's not good. What we want to do, and the picture I was about to point to, well, you guys already saw it. It'll click back on, I'm sure. Yeah, there you go. This is our open ocean aquaculture net pens in Kona, Hawaii. It is the only licensed open ocean net pen in the United States. It has the most sustainability certifications and guidelines of any open ocean net pen system probably in the world besides the other one that we use in New Zealand. There are no antibiotics, no hormones, no dyes. They're fed a natural diet. If they escape, they're actually swimming in natural waters. They're grown from embryonic stage to adult. And it is a 1-to-1 feed ratio. A 1-to-1 feed ratio means for 1 pound of fish we put in, we get 1 pound of fish out, which is really, really good. Oftentimes with things like tuna, which a lot of people ranch, we don't buy ranch tuna, but you'll get like a feed conversion of like 30-to-1, meaning 30 pounds of fish have to go into it. So it's truly like distorting what happens in developing countries where people actually want to eat the fish that you feed the tuna so that the tuna can go to a wealthy person in LA. We'll call LA because nobody likes LA in Portland. And so this is an example of something done the right way. And so one of the things we do at Bamboo Sushi and at QuickFish is we support sustainable aquaculture done the right way because we want to actually make a difference in the supply chains of the world and show people that sustainable aquaculture is positive and can be done, and we want to support that. So when you come in to eat with us, I would say 70% of our seafood is all wild capture. And then probably 30% of it now is aquaculture. When we started, it was probably 10%. But it's something that we really believe in, right? We believe in sustainable farming. That's the simplest way I can put it, and I think every person in this room would say, well, I believe in sustainable farming too. We just want it done right so that we don't have frankenfish, we don't have sick fish that are being fed to people. We're feeding things that are nutritious and nutrient dense and also very environmentally responsible in the way that they're grown and benefit the oceans. Because by us doing this, again, going back to that statistics of 140 million and 90 million, if you have aquaculture, there's almost no waste. And so that's one of the really, really great things is that these fish come from the pen. They can be fresh because they're not way out at sea. They're grown really pretty reasonably close within like usually 60 miles of shore. And then you can harvest them as you need them. And so it's actually a much more sustainable way of bringing a healthy protein to people, but it has to be done right. And so we want to support that in the right way. The carbon neutrality I mentioned earlier, just our goal simply put, and the goal I was saying earlier is restaurants have an imperative to do more. If we're going to be serving what will eventually probably become well over 50% of the food in the world, meaning restaurants, you will go to a restaurant to either get it delivered or to you or whatever, restaurants have a responsibility then to lower their carbon footprint if we know that food is producing roughly between 25 and 40% of all the carbon in the world. So as important as it is to drive an electric car or start eating more vegetables, absolutely. The truth of the matter is that people are going to continue to consume animal proteins, and they are going to continue to consume them in restaurants. And so restaurants have a responsibility towards this. We believe doing it with the mission of offsets right now is the best thing that we can do, and then obviously reducing our logistics and our supply chain, as I mentioned earlier. But nonetheless, we're constantly trying to improve using science and technology how we actually limit the amount of carbon coming out of our restaurants. Something else you may or may not know about us is that all of our restaurants are built to a LEED Platinum standard. We don't actually go for the certification because it's quite expensive for us, and unfortunately the landlord has to sign off on it, and landlords tend to be a little bit more frugal, should we say in the nicest way, than B Corp type companies. But nonetheless, it's something that we really strive to. So everything from the way that we source our products and then the way that we build our built environments and serve it to you is focused on a lower carbon footprint. Health and wellness. This is something really near and dear to us, and I was really excited, and thank you again for seeing how many hands went up who have eaten with us. We have a policy in our restaurants, which is we don't serve anything to anybody that we wouldn't serve ourselves or our kids. It seems like a simple policy, but as many of you know, restaurants don't oftentimes do that. They serve things that they wouldn't serve their worst enemy to their customers. For us, we test all of our fish for mercury, parabens, PCBs. We don't want you having mercury poisoning eating with us. That wouldn't be cool. On top of that, we removed genetically modified ingredients from our restaurants 4 or 5 years ago, which for an Asian restaurant is quite difficult to do. Even things like when you come in and get the edamame from us, it's organic and it's grown in California. All of our soy sauce is organic. Our rice is genetically modified free, and it's grown with no herbicides, pesticides, or fungicides. And then after we're done with the rice harvest in California, we turn it into a migratory path for birds. That was probably the most Portland thing I'll say all day. But it's true. So we really take your health and wellness seriously because we understand that if we're asking you to become an advocate for things that we believe in, you probably need to be healthy and happy and also be around for a while. And so we want to engage you in this way. And so human health is super important to us, and I think something that restaurants need to take a bigger role in. As we all know in this country, we have a healthcare epidemic. We are going bankrupt as a country because of healthcare, and most of our healthcare issues come from lifestyle choices, right? Cancer, diabetes, heart disease, many of these issues are from the food we're putting in our bodies. And food is medicine, as Hippocrates said. And so if we don't serve people things that are both delicious and nutritious, we won't be able to have a healthy future for people, and therefore, it's going to be a bad world. So we really take human health quite seriously. I take this slide deck very seriously right now. This thing is just in and out. Getting near the end, our team member experience, as Stefan was talking about team, we're nothing without them, and they come and go sometimes. High turnover in the restaurant industry, as you guys know. It's very, very high. And so, for us, we really want to be a best-in-class employer. As I mentioned earlier, 10% of the people in this country are employed in the restaurant industry. And if you don't have a healthy middle class, we all know this, you don't have a healthy economy. And so these people have to be able to have houses, have education, have healthcare, be able to actually enjoy their life and have good work-life balance, not need to work 4 jobs to be able to make ends meet. And so that's something really important to us. One of the things we love about B Corp is that assessment of, do you actually pay above the standard median of minimum wage? And it's one of our proudest areas is that restaurants, as many people know, don't have typically high margins, especially ones with such perishable products as ours and difficult things to get in as what we do. But we're super proud to say that we are able to pay our employees, I think it's about 30% above the average wage here in Portland, which is obviously higher than most other places in the country. Thank you. And we offer healthcare, and we offer paid time off, and we are closed for 10 holidays a year, and we do vacations and all kinds of fun stuff for them, and perks and trips and continuing education and all these other things. Some of the things we're working on are 401ks and paternity and maternity leave, which for a restaurant company is unheard of. And so, this is just another super important part of what we do, and where restaurants really need to take a stand, but also you all, when you go out, should ask for that, right? When you're leaving that tip and it looks annoying on the square reader or whatever for some restaurant, ask yourself, that person's, probably making $12 an hour at their average restaurant, right? And so if you can just leave an extra $1, I always, in every situation I do, leave at least $1, if not more, everywhere I go. Because if every person does it, it's a lot of money. And they're able to recycle that back into our local economy. Okay. Is this it? Aha. Okay. Policy and community. It seemed to go out less when I stood over here, so I'm gonna go with the woo-woo vibes and just stand here. So how many of you know that we have 5 marine preserves on the Oregon coast? Raise your hand. Cool. How many of you know that Bamboo Sushi was a part of making that happen? Exactly. Stefan's the only one. He's like, I'm your friend. I know that. We worked with Governor Kitzhaber. We were the only state on the West Coast. California and Washington had marine preserves. We had none. That's super weird given the fact that we are a very sustainable focused state. And so what we wanted to do was be able to say, we also take care of our biodiversity in our oceans. Many of you know Oregon coast crab, especially Dungeness crab. It's delicious. We send it all over the world. We have some of the best albacore in the world. We have some of the best salmon in the world. We have these incredible fisheries, and yet we weren't protecting our oceans. We're all about trees here, which is cool. But at the same time, the ocean's quite important. I often joke with the fact that we call it planet Earth, and yet it's 75% ocean. It's a very human ego thing to say that it's planet Earth. And so with that, we helped instate a number of terms ago, as I said, Governor Kitzhaber, 5 marine preserves here on the Oregon coast, and we were super excited about that, as well as some watershed rights. With that, we also started in 2011 what has now become the 9th largest marine preserve in the world. It's 9 million acres in the South Barrier Island, Bahamas. We started it with $250,000 of our own money, and it was 450,000 acres. And we did that with the Nature Conservancy. And the reason why I mention this is because for us, as a restaurant, especially one that serves seafood, we have both a local responsibility as well as a national and global responsibility. And so we want to do both, right? We don't want to just be doing far-flung things, drilling wells in Africa. Very important, very cool work, but at the same time, we have a lot of things to take care of in our backyard. But at the same time, people in Africa deserve to have clean water. So we do both. And we really are proud of the fact that we've gotten engaged on a policy level. Restaurants have a ton of power, and the reason why is because people like food, and politicians like food, and people like breaking bread and smiling over a dinner table. If you can think of probably many of the best experiences of your life, they were probably drinking and eating with friends. And that is probably one of the most special things that we as a species across the world, I saw it go out again, there we go, do. And we believe that it is therefore a responsibility for people who sell food to engage on the policy level. Just some quick stuff. I love the Stumptown Way. Many people in this room, you guys all know what the Stumptown Way is? Yes? Yeah? No? Stumptown Way, really quick, is that you stay small and you grow from the roots. And that's a Portland motto, right? Stumptown Way, and you keep it local. And that's cool, except for the fact that I'm a big believer in sharing is caring, right? And so, in general, we in Portland have some really cool things that we do, and we want to spread those around the world. And so these are our next locations. Some of them may seem weird, like Phoenix and Scottsdale, or even Los Angeles, as I was ribbing earlier. But the reason for that is because if you can't have a conversation with every person about sustainability and about social justice, you won't fix the problem. And one of my big things is, I love community involvement like this, but at the same time, we all probably have very similar ways that we vote. We all probably have very similar views, and that's cool, but at the end of the day, we don't want to be in an echo chamber. So as a company, we really try to get out of our own little box and really get in there with people who are like, I don't care about bluefin tuna, I could care less about the oceans, I'm gonna drive my diesel truck and leave a net on a seal and shove it in the back of my truck. And we're like, cool, let's have dinner together and let's talk. And so we wanna have these conversations with people all over the country, and this is where we're starting. So we've got quite rapid expansion plans that we're underway with right now, which we're really excited about. And I want to thank all of you for helping make this possible, because if it wasn't for the generous and wonderful support of our community here in Portland, we would never be able to take this message everywhere in the country. Lastly, this tagline is our tagline. It's change the way people eat. We wanted to come down to something really simple, which is the way people eat is broken. We as restaurateurs, we as chefs, have created a system that doesn't work. Our food system is badly damaged. We apply the same way that we build an iPhone, which is economies of scale, to how we transport food around the world, and they don't make sense. Those two supply chains shouldn't work the same way. And so for us, changing the way people eat and getting people to eat more sustainably, but also getting people to think more consciously while they're eating is a big part of our messaging and a big part of what we do. And so this is our little red book. Not to be confused with Mao's Little Red Book. They are slightly different, but nonetheless, we like the Little Red Book idea. And it's got 20 or 30 pages in there about sustainability and about what we do. We have them in all of our restaurants now, so if you go into a Bamboo Sushi next time and you would like to see the Little Red Book, you're more than welcome to ask for the Little Red Book. You can keep the Little Red Book. But we would ask, and my ask of you today is that you help us encourage other restaurants through your actions as patrons and through your actions as just citizens in this community, especially this being one of the best restaurant cities, probably in the world, but certainly in the United States, to change the way people eat. So with that, I want to say thank you very much. I hope you have a great rest of your morning.